If you want, Maggie, we could start like by doing the
Okay.
introduction.
Yeah. Okay.
Thanks.
Okay. Well, welcome everybody. We've got probably one of the most fascinating Zooms that we've ever had today. It's very different from our usual somewhat academic talks. So I'm absolutely delighted. Before I introduce our speaker, Professor David Scott, I'll just mention the usual Zoom protocols, I think they're called. In fact, my Zoom screen has changed somewhat because the last time I was on, it had chat right in the middle. Now it has it under more. I don't know if yours is the same, but if it is, then if you can see under more the chat, and you need to use that if you're going to ask a question for David so that I can see it. It gives me time to read it out. And also David gives David time to think of the answers, which is even more important. So in a few minutes, Marielle is going to take a screenshot of us all so that we can use that for social media. So hopefully you're okay about that. If not, then you have to go to the left of your screen and stop your video briefly. But sorry, I've got a little chest infection. But I hope you're going to be okay about that. So Marielle, I'll start counting down, ready for the screenshot. Okay. So 3, 2, 1, and smile. Okay, finished. Well, absolutely delighted that David has agreed to do the Zoom. I met David when he came over to do research for more research for his work. He was in King's College, Cambridge Archive, and in London. And he started talking about his research and the fact that he'd managed to sweet talk his way into Tilton, Keynes's house, which I was very impressed by. And so I immediately had to pop the question. And luckily, David agreed to do a Zoom, which was wonderful. So David is a professor of voice at Berklee College of Music. He teaches jazz, classical, and contemporary styles. He's also a songwriter and a musician. And sorry, and he has reviews to absolutely die for. I'm just going to read a couple out. They're rather amazing. David explores the intersections of jazz and Americana, city and country, instrumentation and lyrics to create lush compositional covers that are unifying and healing in their beauty. And another reviewer said, I haven't been this moved by a performance of For All We Know since Carmen McRae. I think the older ones among us will know who that is. So over to you, David.
All right. Well, thank you so much for inviting me, Maggie. I'm really excited to chat with all of you. And it's kind of fun and weird being back in Zoom land again because I had a whole setup. So I have my keyboard here. So when I was giving voice lessons over Zoom during pandemic lockdowns, this was my whole setup. But I kind of forgot how it works. So if I start to play a video or something and the audio is bad, just holler at me or put your thumbs down or whatever.
Sure.
So like Maggie said, I am working on this project. I am not an economist. I am not a scholar. I'm a performer and I'm a songwriter and a composer. And about maybe 2 years ago, I decided I wanted to take a crack at longer forms. I'd always written songs for myself, but I wanted to try to write in a theatrical context. And I was sort of hunting around for a subject, but I wasn't sure what I was going to write about. Um, I was in a conversation with a friend of mine who's much smarter than me. He's a philosopher. His name is Matthias. And, I like to keep up on current events, you know, very layman's economics. And I had noticed that in all the periodicals that I was reading, they kept talking about neoliberalism, and I didn't know what that meant. And so I said, Matthias, what's neoliberalism? Can you explain it to me? And he said, I'm not going to explain it to you, but there's this book you have to read. It's by Zachary Carter. It's called The Price of Peace. It's about the life and the work of John Maynard Keynes, the economist. And I just smiled and nodded because there was no way. I don't know if you all have had this experience. If a friend suggests that you read a book, you have to sort of pretend that you're going to read it, but you don't actually have to read it, because the chances of them following up is usually fairly small. But I had the bad luck to have a really good friend who, a week later after this conversation, this book showed up on my doorstep, and it's thick, and it's called The Price of Peace: Money, Democracy, and the Life of John Maynard Keynes. And I said, oh no, since he actually bought me this book, I'm going to have to actually read it. So I stalled for a couple of months, and I finally cracked it open so I could tell my friend that I read his nice gift. And now you can see it's all dog-eared and marked up, and I got completely fascinated and went down the rabbit hole. Oh, and that reminds me, I'm going to throw into the chat. It's not an updated bibliography for this project. I haven't updated it in a few months, but at any rate, if you're interested in checking out some of the works that I've been consulting, it's right there. Like I said, I haven't included anything from the last couple of months. I think at this point, now I've given you a little bit of background, I will go through the synopsis of the story, if that's okay. And maybe I will do the same. Maybe I'll share my screen as I go through this, so you can follow along. Does that sound all right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So, make sure I don't accidentally close my window. All right. So first of all, let me give you they call it a log line in the business. That's a couple of sentences telling you about the musical. John Maynard Keynes developed groundbreaking economic theories in a turbulent time. Animal Spirits, that's the name of the musical, shows how Keynes's friendships and love affairs with brilliant artists and free-spirited bohemians unlocked his genius and changed the world. So here's the synopsis of the story. In 1914, a group of young Londoners throw a costume party. They are mostly artists who live a bohemian lifestyle, enjoying the cheap rents of the Bloomsbury neighborhood. At the party, they impersonate the icons of the Victorian era, mocking them as hopelessly heterosexual, morosely monogamous, rigidly religious, and infinitely imperialistic. Whenever you see in the brackets, that's a spot for a song. Some of them have been written and some have not. I'd say I'm about maybe 40% of the way through all the songwriting for the show. Among the scoffers are the painter Vanessa Bell, her sister the novelist Virginia Woolf, and the historian and ringleader Lytton Strachey. And then there is John Maynard Keynes. Maynard doesn't quite fit in. His friends are confident and self-assured, but Maynard is not sure who he is. Maynard's friends have a clear vision of how to change the world with their art, but all Maynard has is a head for numbers and a job in the British Treasury Department. He has love affairs, but no serious boyfriend. Maynard dreams of winning glory like his artist friends do, by using his gifts to tackle the deep questions in life. And I'm going to read this scene once I finish the synopsis. The song is called One Big Idea. World War I begins, and Maynard is invited to work for the War Cabinet. He thinks that this could be his opportunity to make a difference in the world, so he accepts. But his pacifist friends hate that he is the tool of a government that is sending their generation to pointless deaths. And here's another spot for a song. When the war ends, Maynard is a consultant to Prime Minister David Lloyd George at the Paris Peace Conference, where he is confident that the victorious nations, led by the idealistic US President Woodrow Wilson, will reshape the world towards peace and justice. Not so fast. When the leaders instead decide to impoverish Germany over Maynard's objections, Maynard quits his job. He retreats to Vanessa's country house to lick his wounds and write a book predicting the dire economic consequences of the peace treaty. He knows who he is now. He is an economist. And there's a song there called I Count the Beans. The book is a bestseller, and he gains a reputation as a critic who doesn't follow the crowd. Maynard discovers his economic superpowers when he partners with Foxy, a sharp businessman and investor. Maynard starts making good money. Thanks to his newly acquired rebel image and deep pockets, he is welcomed back into the Bloomsbury group as he subsidizes their artistic lifestyles. And that's Hey Maynard, and that's more of a rap. That's a little bit of a Hamilton nod, that song. But Maynard's conscience is troubled by widespread unemployment. He tries to convince the cynical Foxy that the nation should alleviate the suffering of the unemployed. And that's the song. It's one of Keynes's most famous quotes, in the long run, because in the long run, we're all dead. To cheer him up, Foxy brings Maynard to see a ballet. Afterwards, he introduces him to the star dancer, Lydia. Maynard is fascinated by her freedom of spirit and arranges to see her again. Meanwhile, Vanessa and Virginia learn that Maynard and Lydia are a couple. The sisters look down on Lydia because she lacks their intellect. They worry that their friend, Maynard, has given up on the life of the mind, and they swear to each other that they never will. Vanessa envies Virginia's purity of vision, while Virginia is in awe of Vanessa's ability to integrate her art and her life. And that's a duet between Virginia and Vanessa. Maynard has fallen deeply in love with Lydia. He's confused because she is so unlike him and yet so perfect for him. Lydia is equally smitten. Maynard's heart and humor make him irresistible, and his intellect is unique. She encourages Maynard to dream big. She convinces him that he has the ability to reinvent economics to help more people live fulfilled lives. Maynard goes to a party with artists, dancers, rich capitalists, and aristocratic ballet fans, where everyone is dressed in animal costumes. He has an epiphany. Humans are not rational. They cannot be reduced to inputs and outputs. They are governed by unfounded expectations of an unknowable future, or what he calls animal spirits. And there's the name of the show, and that's the song that's in the key spot. Maynard's bohemian social experiences, his passion for the greater good, and his ambition for greatness allow him to see the world's problems in a way that other economists have missed. Animal spirits, he realizes, explain love, art, and economic behavior. And that's the end of Act 1. Musical theater is usually in 2 acts, not the traditional 3 or 5. So second act begins here, and this is the second half of the show. Lytton visits Maynard to talk about an important decision he has made. Lytton is tired of hiding his unorthodox sexuality from the world. He plans to finish his latest and greatest book and then come out. Maynard fears that Lytton could be arrested. Maynard visits his old boss, former Prime Minister David Lloyd George. Lloyd George has been out of power for years and needs a new platform upon which to stage his comeback amidst the Great Depression. Maynard proposes to be his house economist, advocating for a public works program to address massive unemployment. He asks in exchange for social reforms, including decriminalizing homosexuality. Lloyd George accepts the deal. Maynard's efforts come to naught when his party loses the election. Foxy gets fed up with Maynard's activism and ends their business partnership. Lytton finishes his book but dies shortly thereafter of stomach cancer. His friends gather to mourn. Lytton is gone, and so is their youth. Maynard visits Vanessa and her 28-year-old son Julian, home from teaching English in China. Julian rejects his mother's pacifism and his uncle Maynard's reformist ideas as tepid and bloodless. There can be no half measures in fighting the tyranny of the rich, he says. He announces he will join the communists to fight the fascists in Spain. He is killed in action shortly after enlisting. Maynard is angry at the binary thinking that is bringing down his loved ones and threatening the world. Do people have to be seen as either normal or abnormal, good or evil, us or them? To explore the complexities of the real world of animal spirits, he assembles a super team of the next generation of economists. They will save civilization with a new theory that demolishes the fantasies of capitalists and the nightmares of communists. World War II, the war which Maynard had predicted in his first book, begins. Dogfights between fighter planes loom over Virginia's country home. Her house in London is destroyed by bombers. The stress reawakens the mental illness which had been dormant for years. Fearing that she will lose her sanity, she fills her pockets with stones and walks into the river to drown. Maynard realizes that whatever the virtues of his economic theory, change did not come in time to save his friends. He now pours his energy into writing a blueprint for how the government can pay for the war. For once, his advice is heeded, and Britain is able to hang in against Germany. World War II is coming to a close. Maynard swears that the next generation won't have to suffer what his did. He heads to the Bretton Woods Conference with Lydia, determined to establish a just and peaceful economic order. But the American delegate, Harry Dexter White, proposes international rules which consolidate the power of the US dollar. Late one night at the bar, Maynard says that as long as the dominant nation cements its advantage, there will always be instability and conflict. But White counters that the US plans will use many of Keynes's innovation, but it will cut out the talk of animal spirits and emphasize the profit motive. Rational self-interest, White says, will bring peace. Maynard feels like it is 1914 all over again. Has the world learned nothing since then? But he begins to doubt himself. Maybe it was his fault the last treaty failed, and he doesn't want to sabotage this one. With sadness, Maynard moves to accept the agreement. Maynard is dying of heart disease. He goes with Lydia to visit Vanessa, whom he has hardly seen since the deaths of her son and sister. He tells Vanessa that he tried to rewrite the rules to protect civilization, but he has failed, and we are all at the mercy of the USA now. Vanessa says, "We see things in a way others do not, and so we are misunderstood." But she says, years from now, people will take the innovations of our generation for granted. If they don't remember our names, it doesn't mean we lost. It means we won. So that's, thank you. So it's really hard to summarize a life and many lives and all of the turmoil of that era in a 2 hour and 15-minute show. My first synopsis that I had written, I gave to a friend who's a theater dramaturg, and he said, "You really have enough for 5 or 6 musicals here." So I've been trying to cut and cut and cut and cut, and this is what I've gotten it down to so far. So I think what I'll do now is go to one of the scenes and play some music. Does that sound okay?
Yeah.
All right. I'm going to read, this is, I think it's kind of fun. This is scene 2. So scene 1 is a big party. And this is the Eminent Victorians song, where all of the young people are dressed up it's a costume party. Everybody's dressed up as luminaries of the Victorian era. And Lytton, of course, is leading the charge to mock them and try to take them down a peg or two. Then scene 2 comes along, and that's where you get to meet some of the characters individually. So I think what I'll do now is I will read the scene that is the beginning of scene 2, and then I'll play the song that comes at the end of it.
Okay.
And I'm going to throw the script up again because you'll have to see who's saying what line. It'll take forever if before each line I say. Lytton says, so I'm going to show you the script, and we'll scroll along if I can find it. No, it's not it. Sorry, one moment. Script, copy. Okay, there it is. Share the screen. Okay, there we have it. This opening scene, I'm just scrolling past it. If you're a speed reader, you can see what it is. It's a party at Lady Adeline's mansion. And basically what I did here was I took the entire book of Eminent Victorians and turned it into a musical, turned it into a song. The problem with that is that it's currently at about, it's coming in at about 16 minutes. No, sorry, only 12 and a half minutes. I need to cut it down to about 5. So we'll see what happens there. Okay, so here's scene 2. So we're still at the party, but we've moved to a quieter room on the way to the bar. Is the script up on your screen?
Mhm.
Okay, good. So the scene shifts to a quieter room. Lytton and Lady Adeline are in the middle of a conversation, while Maynard looks on. I don't think you understand what I'm saying, Lytton. Even when we had a female monarch, all the levers of power were being pulled by men. Parliament, the military, finance. You don't need to lecture me. I've been marching for votes for women since I was 15. But my point is that there is no fundamental difference between men and women. Well, actually, if you want to know the difference between men and women, you have only to look to the game of golf. Oh, really? How's that? Lady Adeline, the whole thing turns quite simply on a question of holes and balls. You are simply rotten. What a wonderful night. I noticed you came alone. Are you seeing anyone? A few dalliances, but no great love. Not since... A few? Maynard, you physically resemble a heron, but somehow you are an iron copulating machine. How many are we talking about? I'd have to consult my spreadsheet. Really? What a bean counter you are. All your conquests written down in columns and rows. Do you keep track of the specific sexual acts, or only dates and names? Where is Lytton Strachey on your ledger? You're after Hobby and, well, before Duncan, of course. Ha! You paid for your crimes when those two ran off together. If you play your cards right, you could perhaps earn another entry. Only a fool repeats his folly. Well, aren't we lucky, Maynard? The brilliant and beautiful Stevens sisters choosing to dazzle us with their presence. Ginny, Lady Adeline was drooling when she saw you in your Rossetti costume. Oh dear, Nessa, that stain on your dress. Semen? You pig! You're as bad as Clive. Do I hear my name taken in vain? By my loyal sister-in-law, no less? Nessa, you need to talk to her. Pigs are excellent animals, you know. Their penises are shaped like corkscrews. Ask any country boy. How was Paris? I spent some time with Picasso and Cocteau this trip. I'm cooking up a new theory of post-impressionism, terribly derivative, based entirely on Roger's work, of course, but I think I can add my own spin to it. The bar is this way? Not surprising those two get on so well. Both art critics, nearly identical taste in women. I suppose it is a boon when your spouse admires your lover. I wish I could be as magnanimous about Mary, but I honestly don't know what Clive sees in her. Wifely jealousy? Not very rational of me. Nessa, those two theorize about art, but you actually make art. Do the ideas of critics change the way you paint or the way you think? Not in the way you'd suppose. For example, Roger and I once checked into this horrible hotel, moldy walls and rodents running around, and I thought about Roger's essay on Matisse, how we can focus our whole consciousness upon physical perceptions and emotions. Best sex of my life. My saintly sister may hate me for this, but I would rather read about paintings than look at paintings. And yet I'd rather read fiction than read books about fiction. Duncan! 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 No enthusiastic greeting from you, Ginia. I am not hoping to get into your trousers. Which way to the bar? Down the hall past your still life with lemon, left at my landscape picture. Right. I'd forgotten Lady O had that one. I suppose you keep him around to protect your virtue. My artistic virtue, certainly. When we're painting together, everyone knows not to pester us. What a gift. I wish I were an artist. Not sure it would have made any difference when you were trying to keep Duncan around. He won't stick with anything if it bores him. Virginia, what news on your novel? What I read was the 3rd draft, I think. That was the 4th. I'm working on a 5th now. To me, it seemed ready to send to the printers. I love the relationship between the Mr. and Mrs. Dalloway characters. So authentic. Lytton, I do value your opinion on writing, but I'm not certain you are an expert on matrimony. I was almost married once, and I said yes, but you changed your mind, which was good fortune for you. Leonard is the much better man. What about you, Maynard? What are you up to? I'm working for the government, the Treasury Department. Well, we can't all be creative now, can we? Someone needs to keep the bad old world of money spinning around. I do the analysis, other people make the decisions. So I have loads of free time. I'm writing a book of philosophy. So you're a crusader for truth. Well, a philosopher is sort of like an artist. They search for an idea that will resonate over time, even if their own name is forgotten. So it's not the same. No artist wants to be forgotten. But don't you want to advance the state of the novel? Certainly, but all kinds of people read novels. No one reads philosophy, except other philosophers. At university, our philosophy professor told us that life is worth living because of love and art. Really, Maynard, what else is there left to say? Nothing new. Maybe you should try teaching like your father. And then the song begins. It's called One Big Idea. And I will play that for you now. Okay, now this is a video, so please tell me if there's any problems with the sharing, if there's no sound. Nothing's more embarrassing than thinking you're playing a video and nobody can hear you.
Yes, working.
It's true, I'm not much of a dancer. I'm awkward and lanky and tall. And some say that my sense of humor is not to their liking at all. I also have no ear for music. I can't write a novel or poem. And when I give my take on a painting, my friends say just to leave it alone. But I've got a good head for figures. I got a mouth that just needs to be kissed. Those people who don't want to get to know me, they'll never figure out what they missed. You say I'm nothing, that's what you allege, sir. I'm gonna use my mind to find that one thing that balances the ledger. One big idea, deep and profound. It floats like a ballerina, pushing off from the ground. Tested and retested, easily digested. First time you hear it, you'll think you thought of it. Inventing new common sense, wiping my fingerprints so no seam shows. Who cares if nobody knows that it was my one big idea? One big idea. I may not be handsome like Duncan, or athletic like Roger and Clive, and people may not think I'm worth their attention, or even be aware I'm alive. But I know someday that I'll make a difference. When I find my truth, it will have been earned. You're going to see my genius and passion when my idea will someday change the world. One digest it. First time you hear it, you'll think you thought of it, relieving our discontents, influencing world events with a secret to disclose. But someday everyone knows that it was my one big idea. One big idea. No name or money, but that's not the only power. If I get a bit of luck, I won't get stuck in an ivory tower. One big idea. My one big idea. One big idea. So in the musical theater world, they call that the "I Want" song. Usually, it's the second song of the first act. Then there's a couple other things I'd like to play for you, and then we can kind of open up and have a conversation. The next thing that happens in the story is he goes to work for the War Department, and what date is My Big Idea set in? About 1914.
Thank
Ish.
you.
Yeah. Try not to be too specific if I can help it, because sometimes you have to kind of play with timelines. If there's ways to do it without, obviously causing any harm to the actual historical timeline. But yeah, 1914. So then the war starts, and he joins the war cabinet, and he goes to Charleston, where he is ganged up on by all his friends who say, you need to quit working for this horrible system that is destroying our generation. And so I'll play you that next. There's just one vocalist on this demo. This is a slightly out-of-date demo. I don't have a new one yet. But people are going to be taking turns. So Lytton takes a turn, Bunny gets in on the action, Virginia and Vanessa are all singing in this next song. And this actually, you might be interested, comes from a letter that David Garnett sent to Keynes, which I saw at the King's archive, about how Maynard is simply a tool of the war cabinet, and they're just he's got his skills, and the war cabinet just rubs the bottle, and the genie comes out, and that's you, Maynard. You're the genie, and don't be fooled into thinking that you actually have any influence to make things better. You're just a servant of the warmongers, is basically the idea. Okay, so let me grab this, share the screen. Everybody see the genie in a bottle?
Yep.
All right, here goes.
Don't fool yourself. You're just a genie in a bottle. Genie in a bottle.
I thought we were in this together. The world could go crazy, but we wouldn't care. We could just live for each other anywhere. Until those men in their meetings decided, without any reason, that we'd go to war. Parades glorifying while brothers are dying and sisters are crying out, what for? What for? Rupert thought he would be patriotic. Wilfred said it would all be such a lark. John thought he would feel bigger when pulling the trigger. Offenses repelling, relentlessly shelling. Nobody sparing, you not even caring. The choices before you are stark.
You're just a genie in a bottle. A genie in a bottle.
Sending soldiers off without equipment won't bring Rupert back.
Did you ever think, hey, wait a minute, they're using my brain to kill all my friends? Then once you found you were in it, did nothing deter you, or was it a blur to you? Did it ever occur to you to try and make amends?
I'm making change from the inside.
Birdie's pacifist work got him imprisoned. Clive spoke out in a book that has been banned for bashing those stupid sermons about smashing the Germans. My little boys pretend they're fighting. They think it's exciting, but my friends are dying in trenches for thirst that blood never quenches. Bodies are rotting while the war cabinet's plotting. After you bent the knee, you serve them contentedly. Their wish is your command. Sacrificing people for the nation is senseless talk, like driving sheep over a cliff to protect the flock. Your lasting testament's not in marble, stone, or bronze. You use your spreadsheet and your pen to forfeit men like pawns. On your financial fiddle, you play the dance of death like Paganini. But to the conductors of the war, you're nothing but a G. A G. A G.
In a bottle.
All right, and then the last thing I have to play for you today is the scene at the Paris Peace Conference. And this is a kind of cast of thousands, and there's an orchestra. And I think the text is in this one too, so I'm not going to read anything. I'm just going to hit play. All right.
Maynard, do you hear that? They are calling Wilson the god of peace.
The Germans may never have surrendered to Britain or France.
I didn't expect Paris crowds to be so enraptured with an American president.
If I were in the street now, I'd be singing right along with them.
You and your conchy Bloomsbury friends.
I personally didn't need conscientious objector status. But here they come.
Announcing Prime Minister George Clemenceau of France, Prime Minister David Lloyd George of the United Kingdom, and President Woodrow Wilson of the United States.
Now we see what the new world looks like.
Welcome you winners, let's finish our dinners, then let us all cut to the chase. Divide up our share
on the chargé d'affaires.
Well, but nobody here should lose face.
Let's start talking food.
Oh, I'm not in the mood.
I see here is the weather to carve with a knife and fork.
Our American pork should be sold so the Germans don't starve. To stop the blockade and we'll all have it made.
Well, we won't.
Why is that?
I'll explain. Each Deutschmark they pay for the port goes away from La France's, how you say, legitimate claim. Why not give them your port?
But we won't.
Why is that?
I've got farmers with contracts in hand. We'll deliver the food when it suits the French mood and expect the fair prices we plan.
After you,
blockading force anyway? Don't they realize there are 100,000 people dead of starvation since the armistice?
Let's try a new verse.
Well, it can't get much worse.
I bring it up full of regrets. It's that during the war, how it makes my heart sore. You both ran up all kinds of debts.
Our money went far when we loomed to the Tsar, but the Soviets simply reneged. So we borrowed from Tommy, who went to his money.
Our empire's no longer so big. We marched in the mud and we paid with our blood, while you Yanks sent us bakers instead. The lending conditions were to buy your munitions and rifles and barley and bread.
Where would you been without American men? How the Ruskies announced Das Widzenia. We sacrificed to
And you please you castle the belt of Romania. Romania. You picked over their bones. When your paper comes faster, so we'll have to pay after you.
your imperial desires have started these fires.
Please turn the talk to inflation.
No!
All the small ethnic groups, though they are nincompoops, have the right to form their own nation. An autocrat's voice stills the people's free choice and devolves the power to his minions. Democracy now, and I don't care just how, for the Serbs, the Croats, the Poles, and Palestinians.
Gentlemen, some visitors here to see you.
I'm Dr. Chaim Weissman of the Zionist Organization.
You have worked already to encourage Jewish immigration into the region of the North Cape,
While protecting Muslim rights and developing the regional economy.
as well as Friends of England abandoned their plans to cover the region between them.
And granting the Arab countries independence in accordance with Wilson's 14 points.
Wait, who are you?
Sean O'Kelly of the new Irish Republic. Self-determination for Ireland.
Get them out of here!
Oh, see.
Another visitor.
William Edward Berghard Du Bois, director of the NAACP. The Second Pan-African Congress is meeting down the street, and we have some thoughts. You're proposing autonomy for minority populations. There are 12 million black Americans whose consent to be governed was never asked. That's twice the population of Romania.
You have to be serious. Racial prejudice will take 100 years to eradicate.
After you, our empire will have her view. We found roles where we lost.
You still ask my vote first.
All the wealth of West Africa we give up just after you.
What about reparations? How much of Germany pay? My calculations say they cannot pay more than $2 billion.
How much damage did the war do? Around 20 billion?
We also have to pay pensions to our war widows. So let's say, 25.
25 billion it is. Let's go home.
Wait. How about this? France forgives the German debt, and Britain forgives the French debt, and the US forgives the British debt, and then a revitalized Germany pays off American investment while France and Britain get on their feet again.
After you, so long.
Adieu.
can say that we tried.
We jibber and jabber and turn a new chapter, but just give us that German steel manufacture.
Send the Kaiser to rupture, that was the attacker. The hand on the planet, he proves he's not a smack. I think that I'd rather be put out to pasture. I don't think it matters, we're madder than others. It's not my affair.
I'm from Selager.
I'll give up when I do. After you.
Madam, please. Millicent Fawcett from the Women's Rights Conference. Aren't you gentlemen forgetting something?
I'll give up when I do.
Great.
All right, so I've taken up plenty of your time, and love to have some discussion now that all that's done. I was looking at the chat, and a couple of good points. John and Genie in the Bottle, that was a placeholder name, and I have, let me see, I've changed that to I've got Rupert, Wilfred Owen, and Siegfried Sassoon are the three.
Oh
Thank
yeah,
you.
I wasn't sure if it was somebody like another poet because I know that I saw the tune that I recognize them.
Yes. I that was a placeholder when I was writing it for. I needed a one syllable name, and then eventually when I modified it, I decided I don't have to have a one syllable name, and I put Siegfried Sassoon in there.
That makes
And
more
then
sense.
the Treasury rather than the Treasury Department. Thank you. That is really helpful. And Emma, looks like you're also a reader of the Zach Carter book.
She's
The
an
Treasury.
expert on Keynes, so
Mm-hmm.
No. Yeah.
And I got
some corrections.
corrections from Vara. Thank you for that.
Yes.
So, the two novels.
Yeah. Well, people are
on your
While people are
bibliography,
thinking of
Keynes
questions,
Revolution.
can I ask a sort of larger question,
Of course.
which is, how do you? I mean, I'm just astonished by how much material you've got in, which is amazing. It's just extraordinary, to pinpoint so accurately some of the views and put them in. But how difficult is it to fit that into what you're trying to do musically, in the sense that you've got this music structure, which you would normally fill in all sorts of different ways, and there's there's a placeholder for that you've got.
Right.
How difficult is that?
Well, yeah, you put your finger right on it. The big challenge is to try to throw in historical references that educated people like yourselves will understand, but that an uneducated audience can also follow the story. So the goal with this is that you don't have to have a background in knowing anything about any of these people, which I didn't, 2 years ago. So I'm still very close to that state of innocence, we'll call it. So yeah, the story has to be compelling, and you have to care about the characters, and I think that's anybody who writes any historical, well, Maggie, you would know, any sort of fictionalized history, you have to walk that line between facts and a good story.
Yeah.
I can't remember who said it, but I was reading I think it was a movie review of a biopic film. I can't remember what it was, but the reviewer had a great point. He said the problem with biographical, he was talking about films, but you could just as easily say it about theater, is that it's based on real life. And the problem with real life is that it's just one damn thing after another. So to take real life and try to make it a story, you know.
Yeah, yeah. And to find small scenes that actually, you know, will sum everything up in one go. I mean, I think party sequences are very clever, that you've got party sequences, because it's musical for a start. And when people erupt into song in a party, it's quite logical. So that gives you, I think that's quite clever. Have you got other settings like parties where you've got the conference, the peace conference, which is very clever, with the people who were outside but had voices, and then the party. So what are the other big scenes?
Well, there's another party at the end of Act 1, which sort of brings together all the worlds of all the people we've met. So you've got the Bloomsburys, you've got the ballet crowd, you've got the business people, you've got the aristocrats, and that's the costume party. And that's, you know, that's pretty much made up. But one thing I am kind of getting a kick out of is in all my reading, finding out all the animal nicknames that all these people have. You know, there's goat and bunny and mole, taupe, you know, all these different.
Yeah, because when I asked you about the title, which I thought was really interesting, so I hope you do expand on that. But yeah, I wasn't sure if you meant like they called it to the goat and bunny and stuff like that, but it did have a deeper meaning.
Yeah, I'm going to try to work that in. But animal spirits was a concept that was you know, very important for Keynes. And I don't know if anybody reads you know, modern like cognitive science, but like, what is it, Kahneman and Tversky, a couple of cognitive scientists who've done a lot of research about, in the past like 20 years or so, about just this idea that, you know, we have all these models that depend on the idea that humans are rational, and yet we all know that we're not.
Yeah. Well, two good questions in the chat. The first one from Claire, our chair of the Wolf Society, and she says the song at the Paris Peace Conference has a very similar rhythm to a typical German singing drinking song. Claire's obviously got a secret life here.
I did pick a waltz tempo because they're the three main figures. And, you know, of course, if you read the things, of course, there's the Italian prime minister too, but he wasn't as important. So I just narrowed it down to 3 because it was easier to put on stage. So I thought it would be neat to weave in those 3 voices in 3/4 time.
Yeah. Okay.
But I like the German drinking song connection. I think that's really cool.
I did feel I could almost hear the Oompa band. That,
yes.
You know, there is a very sort of beautiful swing to it. And I like the irony of it. I thought that was lovely.
Yeah. Yeah, that scene is sort of where Maynard gets radicalized. You know, he's still thinking that everything can work out, and then he goes and everything falls apart.
Well, Matthew has a question, who's got a wonderful CD. He says, how close are you to completing the show? What are your plans for performing it? And I'm interested, you're calling it an opera, and to me it sounds, from one of these great songs, to be a musical. So I'm not, that's a whole other thing, the difference between an opera and a musical, because you call it different things.
I've just been calling it a musical. I haven't been using the word opera.
Okay.
But
I think that was what we should take responsibility for that. I think we might have labeled it an opera or a musical opera.
Okay.
Yeah. Apologies if there was any confusion.
It's fine.
So how close are you to completing the show?
I would say I'm about 80% done with a draft of Act 1 and maybe 25% done with a draft of Act 2. And my goal is to finish it by the end of the summer. So I'm a teacher, so I'm pretty busy during the fall and the spring term. But when that's over in May, I'm going to really buckle down and see if I can get a draft by the end of the summer. There's a student ensemble at the college I teach at, which does readings of new works, like stage readings. So I'm going to try to get it to them by September and see if I can get a little, trial student performance at that time.
Yeah, yeah. So you're able to draw on the resources of your college, in other words, for the whole. Yeah, they're all happy to participate.
Yeah, that's the idea.
Good. Yeah, they seem to be enjoying it, which is really nice. Yeah. Yeah. So I was also interested in how much you can do through music that's different from, because Susan Sellers' novel about John Maynard Keynes and Lydia, their love affair, she deliberately structured it like a ballet in 3 sections. And try to write it like a ballet. I mean, I've not done that myself. I mean, I make everything up. I do historical novels, but I'm afraid they're not at all accurate. I just make them to fit what seems right for the character, basically. And I wonder whether you've made things right for the music.
You have to walk out of the theater singing the songs, or it's a failure. So the music is quite important.
Yeah.
Oh, there's a question about the homosexuality reform with Lloyd George. So what I'm doing with those scenes is I'm putting 2 points of historical fact next to each other, and I'm not drawing the conclusion, but one could draw that conclusion, because there is the scene where Lytton is saying, I'm going to come out and I don't care what happens. And shortly after that, Keynes goes to Lloyd George and they have a big talk. And one of the things he talks about is social reforms, including homosexuality. So those 2 things are real. And in the story, I'm putting them next to each other.
Do we know what Lloyd George's response was?
It was, so Maynard wrote all this up. So yeah, I don't know what Lloyd George's response was to that. If anybody knows, please fill me in.
Yeah, I was interesting because I hadn't heard about that with Lloyd George. So.
Yeah, well, it ended up being a moot point because they lost the election.
Yeah.
I've got thoughts on Lloyd George, but I don't think I'll bore everybody with it now, but I was interested about that.
Well, he did put a lot of money into art. That's one thing. He paid for Sargent to go and be a war artist at the front, which was, in fact, he spent a lot of time trying to persuade him. It was very difficult, but the Sargent agreed. Yeah. Any other questions people have got? Any other questions from the chat? Emma says, enjoyed hearing this very much. I have used the same material. How are you finding your students, audience, etc., responding to the quite complex material, and especially the British European background? Are they dealing with this because the music makes it accessible, or are you adjusting for their reception? Emma's very knowledgeable because she has 2 novels about John Maynard Keynes.
Yes, I have that on my nightstand. I haven't opened it yet, Emma, but I'm looking forward to reading it.
Yeah.
So the answer to that is that I'm really trying not to make the piece didactic.
Yeah.
When I was a kid, there used to be these programs on Saturday mornings called Schoolhouse Rock. And it would be like a 5 or 10 minute cartoon with music telling you about history or science or numbers or whatever. And I loved those. And so I have to really hold myself back to not make this whole musical a big Schoolhouse Rock presentation. But one thing I do think is important, and the people that I've showed it to so far have come away that I think it's been successful, is just trying to show that this was 100 years ago. It's not that long ago. The people are not that different than we are today. A lot of the issues that we think we invented, whether it was in the 60s or the 90s or the 2020s, have been with us for a long time, and people have been wrestling with them for a long time. And that, I think, has been getting across. And I'd much rather get that point across than any individual particular data point.
Yeah. Well, Claire's final question is, how much does Lydia feature in the piece? She can take over scenes when she gets into them, as she does in Susan's novels.
Yes. Yeah. No, she's a wonderful character. It's sort of interesting because many musicals are love stories, and there is a love story within this musical, but the overall musical is not a love story. So she comes in about maybe 2/3 of the way through Act 1. And I think in the piece, Lydia is sort of the catalyst to make Maynard realize that he can combine his two worlds, because he's got one foot in this bohemian artistic world and one foot in this cerebral capitalist world. And Lydia in the piece says, you don't have to pick one or the other, that maybe your genius is being a whole person in your work. So yeah, that's Lydia's part.
Great.
Like you say, she could take over.
Yes, well, it's that voice, that accent. Yeah.
I really want to have her I haven't written the scene at Bretton Woods yet.
Oh yeah.
But she translates for the Russian delegates.
Well, she's getting on a bit then, so she might not be dancing very well by then. Yeah.
Yeah, but I think she was skinny dipping in the creek there.
Yeah.
I've been to Bretton Woods. It's in New Hampshire, just one state north of me in Massachusetts.
Okay. Okay.
Oh, question about Hamilton. Yeah, I mean, for sure. When people, because when I tell people what I'm working on, they usually laugh. And then their first reaction is, you're writing a musical about an economist, and they laugh. And then their second thought is, well, but nobody knew who Hamilton was 10 years ago.
Yeah, and look what happened. Yeah, so maybe this could be the second Hamilton. This would be
from your lips to God's ears, isn't that what they say?
Yeah. Okay, if there are no more questions, shall we thank David enormously for what's an incredible amount of work and effort to put together things. And he's even put his email in, which is lovely. And just to say, hope to see you all at our next event, which is a live event, not on Zoom, the 20th of April, where we have Carbe Wilson and our own Celeste Allen talking about my favorite novel, To the Lighthouse. So very interesting event it is. So thank you very, very much, David. We're delighted that you did it. Thank you.
Thank you, Maggie. Thank you for inviting me.
Thank you.
Goodbye.
Okay. Yeah.